Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dervla Morris. I am Director of the Ryan Institute Centre for One Health, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our annual conference today. I should, of course, say good morning, good evening, and good night to those of you joining us from other parts of the world. It's a great pity we could not have you all here with us in person in Galway for our conference this year, but hopefully we'll be able to invite you to join us in person in future years to spend some time enjoying our wonderful city. As many of you know, today is World One Health Day. And over this afternoon and tomorrow morning, we will showcase some of the wonderful One Health research ongoing here at NUI Galway. And we will also hear from several national and international One Health experts, including our two keynote speakers for this opening session, Professor Malcolm Jones, Professor of Parasitology in the School of Veterinary Science at the University of Queensland, and Dr. Casey Barton-Beveridge, Director of the Centre for Disease Control's One Health Office in the National Centre for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. Before we hear from Professor Jones and Dr. Barton-Beveridge, it is my great pleasure to introduce the President of NUI Galway, Professor Kieran O'Hogarty, who has kindly agreed to open this conference.
Thank you, Dervla, and thank you for the kind invitation and all the good work being done by yourself and other colleagues in this particular context. Particularly pleased on One Health Day and World Health Day more generally to welcome you to the conference and to the work being done. It's really important work at NUI Galway. And as colleagues may know, when we started our strategy last year, we committed to a number of values. And I think not only does this work being done in One Health and the Centre for One Health at the NUI Galway fit with these values, but in fact shape them. And many of the colleagues who are on the call here were involved in that context. And particularly, I think, pertinent in that regard is the first commitment that we made, that we're here for the public good. And I think the work that has been done in research and in practice and in the clinic and the clinical context in the last year and a half since we launched the strategy really animated and brought to life that sense of being as a university for the public good. And I'm particularly grateful to colleagues for that work being done, particularly challenging times. And I know that the conversation over the next day or two will not necessarily be exclusively about COVID, but certainly the work being done in this context reminds us, first of all, of the impact and the profound implications of the work. But secondly, that sense of One Health being interconnected, that there are very many aspects of different disciplines, different areas of research that contribute towards a healthy planet, a healthy environment, and towards the public good. And it's captured here. And the work at NUI Galway in particular, we're particularly proud of that work because it brings together a lot of different disciplines, different perspectives in the context of One Health to really look at problematizing, first of all, the public good, but secondly, finding solutions to particularly profound problems as we saw emerging in the last 18 months or so. Secondly, we committed to being here for our students, for society, and for our planet. And again, the work being done here is very cognizant of that. The impact on our students, both in research and in teaching, on their own well-being into the future, the impact on society, first and foremost, as what we serve, and that sense of, again, community that's brought together here in One Health, the sense that we're here contributing to a better society and better outcomes in health and better prevention in health more generally for society and our citizens is particularly profound. And finally, being here for our planet. And particularly in this week when the world is meeting in Glasgow, I think it's also proper that we also recognise the connections between One Health and the environmental context more generally, and the connection between One Health and, for example, issues in the developing world and the planetary benefits that we can have in the context of better health outcomes for citizens globally. And then we committed to a number of values, again, which are very profound, very fitcha fucha, as we say in Irish, very knitted into the context we have here. Values such as respect, and clearly respect for health outcomes and good health outcomes, respect for citizens, patients, and society at large. That's at the heart of the work being done here in the context of the Centre for One Health at NUI Galway. Openness, this conference is part of that, so sharing our research, not only in an academic context, but in broader clinical context as well, and in practice. That's a particularly profound value that's held here in the Centre for One Health as well. Excellence being a third, and I think that's one I very often that we don't emphasize enough, and that connection between respect, openness and excellence. If we respect each other, we do our best work for each other. But I think again in the last 18 months or so, and I'm particularly pleased to welcome Casey and Malcolm in this context, we've seen that the importance of excellence and evidence-based research, evidence-based policymaking, evidence-based health outcomes, I think is particularly important. And the contribution of research has never been prouder, never been more profound. And I think as we move beyond COVID and into other areas that, as you'll be speaking about at the conference, I think that sense of the importance of evidence and evidence-based policymaking, particularly important, and the excellence of research, particularly profound in that context. And the final value, and not the least, but the final value we committed to was that of sustainability. And our students were particularly keen on that, as one might understand the context of the next generation, and then being most profoundly affected by climate change. And very often we define sustainability in the context of climate change. But in this context also, I think conferences like this, work like this, research like this, research and teaching like this in the Centre for One Health at NUI Galway, and more generally, all of the community that gathers together in the conference, really is about sustaining the next generation of research. I'm particularly pleased always to see researchers from other contexts, with other expertise joining in, but also researchers from different generations, and fulfilling traditions and maintaining traditions of research, sustaining each other, first of all, as a community of researchers, but also sustaining the next generation. And I think conferences like this, even albeit online, particularly important in that sense of sustainability for a discipline, for a perspective, for disciplines coming together as in One Health, because we know that the problems of the world, the problems of our students, of our society, of our planet, problems for the public good are not solved from one perspective or one dimension, but from many. And I think the sense that we have of bringing together in this particular centre and in the context and the profound perspective of One Health is that we bring together all of these disciplines in order to solve particularly profound issues for the public good, for our students, society and our planet. So for all those reasons, particularly pleased to open the conference and to welcome you all. Apologies we can't welcome you to Galway, but hopefully in the future, in better times and more opportune times, we'll see you here. And in the meantime, Cogardicus Levidig, we celebrate with you. And I'll finish by saying in Irish, Gora Mahagwiv, which means thank you, but if you parse that, it also means may you have good, which I always think is as good a way as any to finish and to wish you well for the conference. Gora Mahagwiv, may you have good. Thank you.
Thank you, President O'Hogarty, and very nice words there, and thank you again for opening our conference here today. As President O'Hogarty has outlined, NUI Galway recognises the importance of One Health research, and its inclusion as an area of research focus in their university strategy is evidence of this. And indeed, the university has recently furthered its commitment to One Health research and to addressing many of the global challenges facing our world today, many of which would benefit from a One Health approach, including decarbonisation, food security, ocean and coastal health, and antimicrobial resistance. So the Centre for One Health is central to this and brings together researchers across all 5 colleges within the university, together with key external partners from the human health, animal health and environmental sectors. We concentrate within the Centre for One Health on 4 focus areas, which include infectious disease and zoonoses, antimicrobial resistance, emerging pollutants, and people, nature and environment. And through the focus sessions that you will participate and experience this afternoon and tomorrow, you will have the opportunity to hear about the ongoing research here at NUI Galway in each of these areas, and also have the opportunity to hear and share your thoughts with national and international experts in the field. So to start things off, it is my absolute great pleasure to introduce you to 2 major international One Health experts, Professor Malcolm Jones and Dr. Casey Barton-Bevervej. I would like to thank both of them for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us today at both ends of the time spectrum, and we very much look forward to hearing from you both. Once Professor Jones and Dr. Barton-Bevervej have spoken, we will open up a panel discussion. So if you have any questions you would like to put to either of our speakers, please put your questions into the Q&A box. And if you feel comfortable with it, indicate who you are asking the question and who you would like to direct the question to. So our first speaker this afternoon is Professor Malcolm Jones. Malcolm is Professor of Parasitology in the School of Veterinary Science at the University of Queensland. His research interests lie in molecular and cell biological approaches to understanding the biology and control of pathogenic helminth or worm infections of humans and animals, notably schistosomiasis, which he will tell us more about today. Malcolm is President-elect of the International Federation for Tropical Medicine, past President and a Fellow of the Australian Society for Parasitology, and a life member of the Australasian Society for Infectious Disease and of the University of Queensland Veterinary Students Association. He is currently Editor-in-Chief of the Elsevier journal One Health, and previously was Deputy Editor of PLOS Neglected Tropical Diseases. So today Malcolm will present The More You Look, The More You Find, Schistosomiasis as a One Health issue. So Malcolm, over to you.
Thank you, Dervla, and thank you to the President of the University for a warm welcome. And hello to everybody in Galway and other places around the world and perhaps Ireland particularly. It's now 2 years since we were there, my wife and I, and we had an absolutely smashing time visiting Galway particularly. And then on the weekends wandering as best we could through your beautiful countryside. And we always think fondly about that and wish that we could leave Australia to travel again. And one of our destinations for sure will be Ireland. Let me just check, even though I have done a test already, that I'm sharing my screen with you. And I suspect I am. If not, somebody will shout out to me. So I want to speak today about schistosomiasis. But before I do, I just want to say that my day has been bookended with One Health activities because this morning we launched our own One Health alliance in Queensland, centred in the Queensland University, of which I belong. And this One Health Alliance has been funded by the university in much the same way, I suppose, and with the same sort of brief as your One Health Alliance has been put together. So we're quite excited about that, and our launch was today and was timed specifically to happen on this One Health Day. So I'm bookended now, as I've said, starting at around 9:30 this morning with this opening. And then, of course, it's now 11 p.m. Here, or 10 past 11 in Brisbane. So it's well and truly past my bedtime. But I have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, which is on curriculum development and teaching first year biology and so forth. So I think I am much happier doing this than talking about teaching activities. So I don't mind staying up late, and with luck, I might sleep in tomorrow morning and miss the curriculum meeting. But anyway, so I want to talk to you about schistosomiasis as a One Health issue. And as I begin to talk about that, I suppose I need to really ask why I would raise this question and why I talk about and question whether schistosomiasis should be a One Health issue. And there are two reasons. The first is because this story will have, I think, a very good ending in that we'll find out that it is very much a One Health issue, but also because for many of us who've worked in schistosomiasis, we aren't really accustomed to thinking of it as a One Health issue. And but it is, and we need to really come to grips with that. And I think if we do come to grips with all the possibilities that are there for us, then we can better address the disease with better outcomes for the people who are mostly at risk from this disease. But I also came at this question because in early 2019, I accepted the invitation to become editor for One Health. It had been edited by a few people who had specialty in virology before I joined the team, and they left, and I took over as the sole editor on the journal after some months without an editorship. And I was really keen to be sure as I started that I was working myself in a One Health area, because I think it helped to justify, I suppose, my position on the journal. And just to bloat and go on about the journal a bit, we now have 3 editors, and Dervla Morris from your university is one of those who's looking after the special issues, and really pleased to have her there, and so glad that in my time in Ireland I was able to meet her and talk to her about her interests in One Health. But we now have a good stable of editors, and the journal has risen dramatically in the last couple of years, from papers of around 18 published in 2017 and similar numbers in 2018. At this point, the publishers were thinking about closing the journal, but from 2019 and onwards, we have seen a almost meteoric rise in the number of articles that are published, and more importantly, articles that are submitted to the journal. So we're really quite excited about the growth in this area and the interest in One Health studies particularly. So here's a sort of snapshot of what we're up to. You can see that now in 2021, but in 2020, we had many papers that were under consideration. I suppose we just draw attention to the graphs here showing the higher peaks. There's a lot more stuff coming in, which is really quite exciting. And the reason, of course, for this is that in early 2020, of course, the novel coronavirus made its appearance known on the world stage. And of course, at the very outset, it was very much seen as a One Health issue. And in fact, we and others sort of commented on that. I guess in these days, it's moved more towards a global health sort of focus as human-to-human transmission. And such aspects have become more apparent. So SARS-2 and the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a great rise in the journal's publications and submitted articles. We don't wish to be seen as a COVID-related journal, however, and we're very keen to keep the One Health focus going. The other thing, of course, is we received an impact factor ranking, which always does well to encourage people to submit papers. So as the editor of this journal, I did start to think, as I said, about the relationship of the parasites I study to the whole One Health area. So here we have them now. These are schistosomes. Schistosomes are blood flukes. They're flatworm parasites. They belong to the phylum Platyhelminthes and the class Trematoda and subclass Digenia. And they are a peculiar group of Digenian trematodes. They're peculiar in that they are evolutionarily distinct from other groups of trematodes. And they have many distinguishing features in their biology and their structure and their biochemistry. One of the major peculiarities of these worms is they have separate sexes, and we can see the male worms here, very long leaf-shaped worms, and the females are shown here on the left, or one female is shown here on the left. The females are small and slender and are colored quite darkly because they have within their elongate gastrointestinal system the broken down products of the blood cells that they have ingested, and they pack their intestinal regions full of blood cells and are much more avaricious feeders than the males, who appear quite white by comparison. So the males have a special groove on their ventral surface. It's called a gynecophoric canal, and the female worms will nestle within this canal, and together they traverse through specific veins and venules of either the gastrointestinal tract or the urinary bladder and reproductive organs of humans. They are thus internal parasites and internal tissue parasites feeding on blood, and hence their names. Another name for schistosomiasis is, of course, snail fever, and it's known by that moniker throughout the world because these parasites are transmitted through snails, through freshwater species of snails. And I'll talk about that more as this talk unfolds. So schistosomiasis is a really important acute and chronic diseases in certain tropical regions throughout the world. And people are exposed always through contact or contamination with water that carries infective agents, larval worms, which are called Cercariae. The life cycle is maintained by lack of hygiene, by people excreting eggs of the parasites with waste materials, fecal material, urine, into freshwater locations. And the behavior of people to go to water, either in work or play, or for whatever reason, they then become infected with these parasites. Schistosomiasis, we really only have one method of control. We have a single drug to control it. And largely through philanthropy, we have now the ability to provide drugs at a wide scale to many populations in endemic areas. And so in the major areas of focus, which are in countries in Africa, 1 to 2 countries in South America, and particularly in China and the Philippines, where these diseases are endemic and major problems, large-scale drug treatment with praziquantel is the major form of control. We don't have vaccines, although many of us have worked extensively to try to develop vaccines. We don't have other drugs, especially that are useful against the parasite, although there are some leads. But we do rely on praziquantel, and very fortunately, there doesn't appear to be much evidence of resistance against praziquantel, although certain people in certain regions will give whispers about dropping sensitivity of some populations of the parasites to this particular drug. But reliance on a single drug is not particularly a great thing for us, and we need much more extensive and integrated controls. So there's about 236 to 270 million people that are infected with schistosomiasis throughout the world. Of those, about 105 million people have been reported to be treated. So we're not reaching the entirety of the population, but a large number of people are being treated, and at least, if nothing else, the drug treatments are reducing the pathogenic burden of these parasites on those people. So there are 5 species, 6 species, which are of primary significance in schistosomiasis. They're categorized both genetically, but also in relation to where they occur in their host. So we have 2 general forms of parasites, those typified in the first 4 rows, from Schistosoma mansonis, Schistosoma japonicum, Schistosoma mekongii, and these other species we group together as agents of intestinal schistosomiasis. And they're called agents of intestinal schistosomiasis because these organisms live within the veins and venules that surround the gastrointestinal tract. In other words, they occur within the mesenteric veins and venules, and they deposit their eggs then within those locations. And the eggs, through a mechanism that is quite peculiar to these parasites, have a way of working themselves across the various membranes and tissues and organs to pass through the mucosa of the intestinal lining so that the eggs are voided with feces. The other species sits in a group all of its own, but belongs to a group in which we find many schistosomes of animals, is Schistosoma hematobium, and it's the agent of urogenital schistosomiasis. And the eggs that this parasite produces are voided in urine. And of course, this parasite lives in blood vessels around the urinary bladder, particularly, and its eggs then pass typically across the urinary bladder, or sometimes to organs of the genital system. This is a particularly virulent and nasty parasite. Of all the parasites, is probably responsible for the greatest disease burdens. It has been suggested to be an agent of cancer, particularly of the bladder, and the interactions between the parasite and cancer formation are not really characterized and are an area of future study. Schistosoma hematobium, as I'll say in a while, causes very severe diseases, particularly in younger people. So here are a map of the distribution of various species of schistosomes throughout the world. We have Schistosoma mansoni, which is the most researched parasite, occurs throughout the sub-Saharan region of Africa, particularly in the moister regions. With the slave trade that went from Africa to Brazil and to the Caribbean islands, the parasites were taken as well, and fortuitously for the parasite, I suppose, there were receptive snails that could be infected with the parasites, so that the disease became endemic, particularly along the east coast of Brazil. And for any field work that I've done, my field work has been largely conducted in the regions of Brazil and not so much in Africa. Schistosoma hematobium is present throughout, again, the sub-Saharan region of Africa. And it also has been recorded up into the Middle East. And in some of these countries, the parasite is being well controlled and is not so much of a problem there. We have an Asian form of the disease caused by Schistosoma japonicum, and this was known to occur mostly along a band in China and also within the Philippines. It also was found in Japan, but has since been eradicated, occurring just in one small pocket of Japan in animals. This parasite is most dominantly known from China, and a lot of work has been done towards eradication of that parasite from China particularly. It's still highly endemic and causing problems in the Philippines. So the parasites will invade the host by burrowing through the skin. This person's knee here shows, you may not see it so clearly, small spots which show the urticarial reactions against invasion of the parasite, and in this case, death of parasites. So some parasites will die as they invade the skin, but these are secarial stages with a tail, a body down the bottom here. The body is equipped with a bunch of secretory glands equipped with many, many proteases and other substances which enable the parasite to burrow their way quickly through the skin into the deeper tissues. It takes around 2 to 3 days for a parasite to gain passage through the skin. Once they get in, I guess the biggest hurdle for them to invade the skin is the basement membrane of the epidermis. Once they get in through that epidermis, then they will move around looking for a capillary and then move through the into the capillaries, and once they've got in there, then they may migrate on a very long migratory pathway, ending up eventually within the liver. And here we have some work that was done at the University of York showing invasion of the parasites through the skin, secretion of material. And of course, as these parasite is migrating inwards, it leaves behind a little plug of secreted material and I guess skin or tegument of the parasite, which is highly immunogenic and I guess in some sense fools the host into raising a response against this and attacking this, while the parasite sort of swims away and goes about its merry business of developing. So the parasite will migrate through the host, and the juvenile parasites will eventually, after many circuits through the host, and particularly through the lungs, will end up in the liver of their hosts and human hosts, and there within the blood system in the liver, the male worms will scout around for a female worm, and then finding a female, he will grab onto her, and this bonding causes a number of changes within both of the parasites that induces them to develop to become adult. And as they are developing the parasite, then parasite pairs will then migrate to their sites of infection. So for the intestinal forms of schistosomiasis, they'll migrate along the mesenteric veins and will then wander through these veins, feeding on blood and depositing eggs. The urogenital form of schistosomiasis, sorry, my mouse has just decided to be a little bit crazy there. The urogenital form undergoes a really strange sort of migration from the mesenteric circulation to the systemic circulation. What it does is it will migrate all the way down along the mesenteric veins until it finds the veins around the rectum. And in there you have an anastomosis of veins where the systemic blood and the mesenteric or portal blood mix in the veins, and it'll go all the way down to the rectum and then take a right-hand turn or a left-hand turn and migrate up into the systemic system until it reaches the urinary bladder. And the migration of these parasites is specific to parasites. Some will occur in anterior parts of the intestine, some in posterior parts of the intestine, or in the veins of the intestine, I should say, while Schistosoma hematobium moves towards the bladder. And once in these locations, they will produce eggs, which are morphologically characteristic for the species that have produced them. So here we have a picture of a pair of worms migrating around in the intestine of a host. This is actually from a bird, so the intestine has been slit and squashed, and we find the parasites are migrating through the blood vessels, and each of these spots are eggs that they deposit, and they just deposit them against the blood vessels wall, and there the eggs induce an enormous immune response. And here we have an immune response typified by the migration of lots of cells to there. So it's a granulocytic style response with many neutrophils initially, eosinophils, and then macrophages and hepatic stellate cells will go there. So at first the host tries to kill them, realizing it can't do that. It starts to wall them off by developing a kind of fibrotic phenotype so that the eggs are surrounded by fibrotic tissues. So the effects of the deposition of this egg leads to loss of blood flow in the areas, blockage of veins, co-opting of different veins to carry blood back to the heart, and a whole range of other problems, ascites and swollen belly. And you often will see this sort of swollen belly syndrome occurring in quite young children. And it's a very terrible problem of this disease. So stunting occurs in certain people. And this lady has had schistosomiasis through life. This person from China, the nurse or doctor, is, I guess, a normal sized adult. And the effect of schistosomiasis can be stunting, cognitive impairment, and a range of other problems. Here are the culprits here. The eggs are highly immunogenic, and they induce responsiveness in various tissues. I should say that many of the eggs, while deposited against the blood vessels of the intestinal wall, get washed into the liver, and there they get trapped, useless to the life cycle, but problematic in terms of pathogenicity to the host. Genitourinary urinary schistosomiasis, does the same sort of thing, but in the tissues of the bladder, so and the genital system, so that the organs associated with reproduction or urinary function are severely damaged by these parasites. So the disease burden then can be considered as very significant effects that can be observed quite easily clinically. So you can get enlargement of the liver and spleen. You can get fibrosis of various tissues. In the case of schistosoma hematobium, you get inflammation and scarring of the urinary genital system. But there are also many, many problems that are not really observed clinically and are very difficult to observe. So anemia is quite common with infection, either through the action of the parasites or anemia of infection or anemia as a result of immunological responsiveness, growth stunting, impaired cognition, decreased physical fitness, and for genital schistosomiasis, pain, infertility, stigma for people who suffer from very severe schistosomiasis, and increased risk of contracting other diseases. And so it is a major problem in that regard. And schistosomiasis is largely a problem of the young. We generally find in children and young adults that egg excretion is much, much higher. With increasing age, there is some degree of tolerance that occurs in humans, but the young are severely affected. So it is a problem that leads to significant loss of function in humans and has significant population effects in endemic areas. So my interest in schistosomiasis has been largely in the, I guess, biomedical fold of the diseases. I've been interested largely towards developing new therapies and controls. So looking at testing a number of different molecules as vaccine targets. And together with some collaborators in Australia, led by Alex Lucas, we were able to develop one particularly promising lead that's now moving on towards trials. And that's one of the tetraspanin molecules. And there are a number of other vaccines that have been developed by other groups that are similarly moving on towards trials. None have progressed particularly far, but there is hope that we will get something happening in years to come. I've been interested in characterizing the parasites to various degrees to understand, I guess, expression profiles of different regions of the parasites. So we, I guess, led the way in developing organ and tissue-specific transcriptomics. We used laser microdissection microscopy to do that, a very painful technique that stole quite a few years of our lives in working on that area, but we were able to find some good insights into profiling expression patterns of different structures so that we could, again, I guess, enhance discovery of agents for exploitation in vaccines. I've worked on different metabolic systems within the parasites, and this work has led me in more recent years to focus specifically on studying the schistosome egg in particular, looking at its pathogenesis, looking at its structure and function, and trying to enhance diagnostic capacity built around identification of eggs in infected humans. But as I said, the dilemma I had and the question I had to ask myself was, how well does schistosomiasis fit into the One Health mold? And the rest of the presentation, I just want to talk about that to show you just what an important One Health area of research and One Health pathogen schistosomiasis is. So schistosomiasis have long been thought as being human-only parasites. Those that occur in Africa and South America are really only ever spoken about, or only ever were spoken about, in terms of their impact on humans. And there was little understanding of the interaction of these parasites with animals. And so we barely thought about them, I guess, in terms of One Health, even when One Health became and important concepts when it emerged on the scene. I think that's largely because of ignorance. We didn't know very much about animal schistosomiasis. And although we now know that many animals are infected with schistosomes, in fact, we always did know, but I guess the corporate consciousness didn't really acknowledge that there were many species out there that infected animals. I think it was largely because, firstly, the schistosomes of animals were infecting animals in developing nations, and people were also infected. So rightly, people focused on human infections, but also because many of the animals that bore these parasites didn't really seem to get very sick with the parasites at all. And so the attention was given largely to human diseases and concepts, rather than thinking about schistosomiasis in a much, much broader context than it should have been. So I guess we really thought about schistosomiasis in terms of global health, looking to control this parasite, really to look to find ways to improve health of humans across the various areas in which the parasite occurs, and not so much in context of One Health and planetary health. And I think we needed to start to think about it in terms of One Health, because in doing so, we do move towards a much better opportunity for providing control. And that's really through, I think, development of systems thinking, developing ways of bringing together various control modalities and activities to combat this very complex and important disease. So schistosomiasis is very definitely a One Health issue, and I want to talk about that now. And the first thing is to go back to look at its host range and to think about schistosomiasis as very much a zoonotic disease, or a collection of zoonotic diseases. And in fact, if we think about schistosomes and all trematodes in their context, we find that they are really parasites of snails. When you look at all trematode species, by and large, their highest level of specificity is directed towards the snail host that they infect. And in fact, some of the early trematode biologists really thought about them as parasites of snails and could trace their evolution through to parasites that were solely parasites of snails. And so some of the ancestral types, or the relatives of schistosomes and other trematodes, are strictly parasites of snails, but these are parasites that have then adopted subsequent hosts. And so many of these parasites have absolute host specificity to their snail hosts, and they're less fastidious in choice of their final hosts or mammalian hosts. And so these, I think we need to think about them perhaps almost as parasites of their vectors, and not so much of their mammalian hosts, although of course we're human-centric. So when we look at in Africa and different parts of the world where schistosomes occur, we find there are many species, and the more we look, the more we find that schistosomes are species that are human-focused in some contexts, but will also move across to infect different animals. And I won't try to explicate this slide more deeply, but we find that many schistosomes occur in a number of species. So they are truly zoonotic species, but they're zoonotic with a kind of twist. And I want to talk about that in some way on the next slide. And this comes from work that was done in Africa to look at hybridization of different species within the human host. And so what we have here is evidence now that schistosome species will hybridize and form reproducing pairs between species. So in animals, we have infections with species, Schistosoma bovis, for example. In humans, we have infections with Schistosoma hematobium. And we find that sometimes Schistosoma bovis parasites will get into humans, but they can't develop unless they pair up with a partner belonging to Schistosoma hematobium. So here we have a male and female Schistosoma hematobium together, but in this case, we have a Schistosoma bovis paired up with a Schistosoma hematobium and vice versa, and then genetic hybrids which are produced by an original pair that have hybridized in this way. And so the coming together of different species within a particular host has led in many occasions throughout Africa to the formation of hybrid individuals. And this is now becoming recognized as a deeper problem and a very widespread problem throughout all sorts of Africa. And the more we look, the more people are finding different sorts of hybrids. And so on this map of Africa, just to show you the different sorts of hybrids that have been found, and this was written by some French authors in 2021, the brown colored hybrids are hybridizations between human schistosomes and animal schistosomes, and the blue or purple ones shown there are hybridization between human schistosomes of very different phylogenetic groups. And so interspecies hybridization is, as I've said, a very important issue now. And of course, the genetic alterations that occur through these hybridizations are leading to many, many problems and new horizons in our understanding of schistosomes. Of course, the heterotic alterations as a result of hybridization lead to conditions, hybrid vigor, a broader intermediate host range so that the hybrids can infect 1 to 2 species of snails, whereas their progenitor ancestors could only infect 1 species only, a broader host range in terms of animals and humans, difficulty in diagnosis, difficulty in discovering where eggs are being released and hence where the parasites are occurring within their hosts, effect on chemotherapeutics, and if we do develop vaccines, will this lead to diminished efficacy against these particular parasites? And so there are a number of problems that are rising because of this propensity of these parasites to hybridize in animals and their hosts. So the control of these parasites requires really careful thinking and planning. And as I said before, we need to start to develop systems thinking and planning to control parasites. Until now, we've had very good control strategies that are based around chemotherapeutics with a single drug, praziquantel. It works really well. And as I said, there's not much evidence of resistance against this particular drug. But we also know that it's not very effective in preventing reinfection in humans. And people will be infected within days or months of treatment, depending on the level of parasites within a particular region. And so reliance on chemotherapy is not sufficient. And we need to add different forms of control to combat this particular group of species of parasites. So some of the things we can do is really to recognize that transmission of schistosomes relies very heavily on freshwater snails. Now, snails are abundant and important components of freshwater ecosystems, and these within the snails, the parasites will undergo a range of asexual reproductive activity, so that one infected snail can give rise to thousands of parasites that are infectious to humans. And the life cycle of schistosomes is bound very tightly to the snails. Where you don't have the snails, you don't get transmission of the parasites. The same thing applies for Fasciola hepatica. in Ireland, where it rains a lot, I know that John Dalton can just stick his hand outside his kitchen window and reach down onto the ground and probably pick up a snail that's infected with Fasciola hepatica. Probably not, actually. I think I exaggerate there a little bit. In Australia, where I'm sitting right now with this desert mountain behind me, not so much. Fasciola occurs around this region here. The life cycle of schistosomes is tied very much to the presence of the snail hosts. And so control is largely seen as needing to involve understanding of snail biology and all of the things that affect the interaction between the parasite and the snail. So climate, hydrology, water engineering, the building of dams and the building of irrigation systems. How does that affect snail hosts? Changes in the human usage of watercourses. How does that affect the parasite interactions? In some cases, it's led to increases in parasite infestations in certain areas. In others, it's led to a diminution. Climate, as I've said, has done the same sort of thing, and we're looking at how that might change things in the future. Controlling snails, either with chemicals or through biological control, using crayfish, for example, to eat snails, or using fish species that are snail-eating fish. Looking at the interaction of parasites and the snails on a genetic basis, and a range of other areas. So really, schistosomiasis control will inevitably bring together a range of different groups of people to come at a problem. So we're just not working on drug control, but bringing together a range of different areas to block transmission, as well as to minimize human disease. Looking at climate dependency of schistosomiasis, we find that there are a number of predictions of how schistosomiasis will develop or diminish in years to come. Fortunately for Africa, the modeling or best guesses are suggesting that in certain areas there will be a diminishing of schistosomiasis as a threat because of the changing climate. But in many parts of the world, particularly in the cooler areas, it's suggested that we're challenged by the developing importance of these parasites. And we know of this just recently when there's been an outbreak of schistosomiasis in Europe, and this was documented quite well. I'll move along though. There's urgent need for improved surveillance and treatment of schistosomiasis, particularly as we move through drug treatment to start to diminish the impact of diseases in certain areas. We need to develop much more highly sensitive diagnostic techniques, and a number of us have been working quite hard in that sort of area. Drug resistance, an important One Health component, is perhaps not so much at this point a problem for schistosomiasis, but we need not to be complacent about this. In recent years, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, control of many neglected tropical diseases, including schistosomiasis, has stopped altogether. And I remember reading just the other day that in Brazil, I think in every region where schistosomiasis is endemic, control strategies has been stopped or vastly diminished because of the severe impact of COVID-19 on Brazil. And of course, response to schistosomiasis requires a commitment from multiple agencies. So one country that has done particularly well in recent years in controlling schistosomiasis has been in China, where they have a problem caused by, that is the parasite Schistosoma japonica. It's transmitted between humans and Onchomelania hupensis snails, and it infects about 40 different species of hosts, including buffalo and goats. China has had a long battle with schistosomiasis. They've known about it for many years. And there were some very early writings of the disease caused by this parasite. And it was in around the 1900s that the parasite was actually recognized. And since that time, there's been a great move to eradicate the parasite, probably because their leader, Mao Zedong, was very much involved himself in work against this parasite. So through very stringent control strategies that have cut across a number of areas of their society, government, and local communities, they have moved the very severe burden of schistosomiasis to something that is looking to be very, very highly controlled. And if I'll rush through the slides because I think I'm running out of time. If you look at the number of people with schistosomiasis over the years leading up to 2017, it's dropped from millions of people infected down to thousands of people infected, and they're moving towards almost cessation of active disease in that country. Their control strategies have arisen through a number of different strategies employed, including administration of praziquantel to infected humans, looking to decrease disease, looking at sanitation, changing agricultural practices so that animals that could act as carriers of disease are removed from the edges of water so they're not being infected. And this has led to many, many changes, some of which are not viewed very positively by the people, but nonetheless, they have helped to diminish the disease in those particular areas. And of course, snail control and habitat modification to continue to control snails. And their criteria for elimination have been very strict. And the Chinese people particularly have been very vigilant to work to control the disease. And they've actually set up criteria to test for elimination of the disease, which far exceed those set by the World Health Organization for elimination of the parasites throughout the range of schistosome parasites. So very vigilant activity in control is something that's led to success and control of the species. So they have many challenges, however, to move towards full eradication, and I list them there. And I don't really expect anyone to read them, but the challenges can be addressed by, I guess, government commitment, by thinking across different areas of scientific endeavor and bringing together people to work together, which is the essence of One Health, through looking at ecology, training and education, engagement with stakeholders, and a range of other activities. And then to consider schistosomiasis control in other areas. So in Africa, like Malawi, there's been active work there and in many parts of Africa towards control of the parasites. But in like Malawi, we have in certain areas communities which experience very high level of poverty. And some of the control strategies involve preventing people from fishing, to change the ways in which people fish. And of course, to do that raises a real problem for the people. So the questions that sort of homeowners, that parents face is the sort of basic dilemma. Do I contract a schistosome infection in the future by going fishing? Or do we go hungry tonight? The burden of poverty and the need to be out working to feed the family sets them, I guess, against control of these parasites. So it's a major problem in the whole control strategy. And so people who are working with the local people in those endemic areas are developing a number of different strategies, simple strategies that together are looking towards controlling the parasite, and they involve transmission blocking strategies as well as chemotherapeutics to control the parasite. So transmission blocking treatments, empowering people, particularly empowering women in societies to move towards educating people to change food security habits so that people rely more on agriculture, so they're not relying on fisheries for their sustenance so much. Managing fisheries, banning fish near shores, and that has the particular effect of allowing snail feeding fish to survive, so that snail populations are controlled, and education becomes very important. So schistosomiasis is very much a real One Health issue, and it's something that involves a coming together of many different areas, and I guess coming together of the ways of thinking. And so with that, I should stop because I'm sure I've gone over time, and I hope I haven't cut into Dr. Casey Barton Beveridge's time at all. But as I finish up, I just want to thank you all for listening today. I hope what I said was a good way of perhaps firing up discussions. I look forward to hearing the other talks as much as I can before I have to go to sleep. But I want to thank so many people, particularly in Ireland, for being wonderful hosts to me in the past, particularly well in 2019. But John, we've worked together and met together and had a few beers together over many years, and I want to thank him and his lab for their great hospitality, Dervla for inviting me, but I also want to talk and thank and acknowledge many of the people that I've worked with myself. I didn't talk so much about my work in schistosomiasis, but I've worked with many people who have helped to develop the ideas. Also want to thank the One Health Journal and the International Federation for Tropical Medicine, who are co-owners of the One Health Journal with the Elsevier company. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll hand back to our chair.
Thank you, Malcolm, for an excellent presentation, and you certainly provided us with lots of food for thought there, and I look forward to our discussion later on this afternoon. So just a reminder to those attending, if you have any questions for our speakers, please put them into the Q&A box. So we'll now move on to our second speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Casey Barton Beveridge. Dr. Barton Beveridge is Director of the CDC's One Health Office in the National Centre for Emerging and Zoonotic Infectious Diseases. And her role is to serve as the agency's lead for implementing a One Health approach to public health that connects human, animal and environmental health, enabling the CDC and partners to address emerging zoonotic and infectious diseases and other shared health threats at the human-animal environment interface. She is experienced in bringing together animal, human and environmental health officials at the local, state, federal and global level to bridge gaps related to emerging zoonotic and infectious diseases, including COVID-19. During her extensive career at the Centre for Disease Control, Dr. Barton Beveridge has done everything from investigating outbreaks in the field to conducting epidemiologic research related to the prevention and control of zoonotic, foodborne and vector-borne diseases. In her leadership role at the Centre for Disease Control, she enjoys mentoring students and new staff to help them reach their career goals. And in her personal capacity, she serves as a member of the One Health High-Level Expert Panel. So today, Dr. Barton Beveridge will present One Health, the Power of Collaboration. So over to you, Casey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morris. It's a pleasure to be here, and I greatly appreciate the invitation. It's a real honor. I actually first met Dr. Morris when I was visiting Galway on holiday. We had a cup of coffee at Kai and were able to talk about One Health, and that has led me on this path here today to talk with you all. So Galway is one of my favorite cities to visit, and I'll look forward to returning there sometime in the near future. But I'm really pleased to be here today to talk to you about the power of collaboration to effectively address shared health threats. And I want to wish everyone a happy One Health Day. So to start off, the health of people is closely connected to the health of animals, plants, and our shared environment. And you can see through these examples of the pictures here, the different types of these close connections. And that's going to be a theme of this presentation. So why is One Health important? As Earth's population is growing, our connection with animals and the environment has been changing. People are living closer together. Climate and changes in land use are impacting health. There's more global trade and travel, and that includes for animals, plants, and people. And also animals are more than just food. So these factors are making it easier for diseases to spread between animals and people. And a One Health approach helps us to tackle these shared health threats by addressing all angles at human, animal, plant, and environment. So zoonotic diseases are one of these health threats that require a One Health approach. There's 6 in 10 existing human infectious diseases that are zoonotic. 3 in 4 emerging infectious diseases of humans have an animal origin, like COVID-19 and Ebola. 8 in 10 agents with potential bioterrorist use are zoonotic pathogens, and a One Health approach is essential here. These are just some examples of the economic impacts of disease outbreaks over time, starting back in 2002. And I'm sure you can imagine a big giant bubble here off to the right side of the slide with the impact of COVID-19 and the trillions of dollars. So these types of outbreaks and pandemics have huge economic consequences. COVID-19 has really been a catalyst for change. There's no shortage of One Health headlines for COVID-19, and it's been really exciting to see this global spotlight being brightened on One Health. One Health is not a new concept, but it's gaining the recognition it deserves in the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. And world leaders at the G7 and the G20 are acknowledging the importance of One Health. Of course, partners at the World Health Organization, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, or the World Organization for Animal Health and the UN Environment Program are also putting out calls for action for One Health. I'm going to talk more in a moment about the One Health high-level expert panel that was just formed this year and tell you a little bit more about that. And just these different examples of One Health projects and initiatives that have been ongoing are being launched right now to further collaboration in reaching the goals of protecting health for all. So the One Health high-level expert panel, or OLEP, as we call it for short, I'm serving in my personal capacity, and we have an advisory role to the partners, FAO, OIE, UNEP, and WHO, shown here at the bottom of the slide, to provide multidisciplinary as well as evidence-based scientific and policy guidance to address global, regional, and national challenges raised by One Health. Our initial focus is on providing a policy-relevant scientific assessment on the emergence of health crises arising from that human-animal ecosystem interface, along with key research gaps, and also guidance on the development of a long-term strategic approach for reducing the risk of zoonotic pandemics, looking at early warning frameworks and synergies needed to advance and implement a One Health approach, including in areas that drive pandemic risk. So the OLEP's advice is going to contribute to enhancing strategic orientations and coordination and providing high political visibility on the subject of One Health. And we're a group of 26 members from all around the world. And you can check out this website to learn more about it. But just to highlight, we've got 4 working groups focusing in on One Health implementation, which includes developing a One Health definition and theory of change, a working group looking at the inventory of the current knowledge in preventing emerging zoonoses, a 3rd working group on surveillance and early detection and rapid data sharing in line with preventing emerging zoonoses, and a 4th focusing in on factors causing spillover and subsequent spread of diseases. So really excited about the outcomes that will be showcased through the work of the OLEP in the near future. Also, just this week with the G20 Finance and Health Ministers meeting, they put out a statement, which you can read the full link here, but they said we're determined to advance pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, as well as to prepare the way for stronger post-pandemic recovery in line with the comprehensive One Health approach. And they acknowledged the work of the WHO, FAO, OIE tripartite, and UNEP, and the involvement of the OLEP. So it's very exciting to see world leaders that make up the G20 highlighting the importance of One Health. This is a really big deal, and we have to seize this opportunity to achieve our goals in protecting health for all. So there are many benefits of One Health collaboration. The power of collaboration. It ensures health and welfare for all people and animals living in shared environments. It helps us improve ability to address shared priorities across sectors. By collaborating and having these conversations across sectors, you can flag opportunities for greater efficiencies and outcomes, maximizing those limited resources that we're all faced with, and maximizing our outcomes in protecting health. Applying One Health helps to advance global health security. It allows partners to develop appropriate and also sustainable strategies, action plans, and investments. It can improve international standards compliance, such as with some of those shown here on the right of the slide, and it can help ensure and coordinate safer trade and travel for people and animals and animal products. So One Health issues aren't limited to zoonotic diseases or emerging infectious diseases, but that's going to be the focus of my remainder of the talk. But I wouldn't do One Health justice if I didn't mention it's highly relevant to antimicrobial resistance, food safety and security, vector-borne diseases, environmental health, chronic diseases, mental health, occupational health, and the list goes on and on. So the power of collaboration applies to many different areas with that connection of the health of people, animals, plants, and our ecosystems and environments. So an important thing when launching a One Health collaboration is having a common language. So this is our US government definition of One Health. It's a technical definition, but it's allowed all of our different agencies and departments and even our state partners at the subnational level working together to use a consistent definition of One Health with a focus on the goal of achieving optimal health outcomes, recognizing that close interconnection between people, animals, plants, and our shared environment. And having this common language has been really important for the foundation of our collaboration. It's also important to say One Health is a team sport and partners are key. There's no single person, agency, or sector alone that can address shared health threats. We must work together, and we're stronger together in making a difference for protecting health. And that includes government officials, but also non-governmental organizations, international organizations, the private sector, academic partners, civil society, and many, many others working together to achieve these optimal health outcomes. So an important part of knowing who you're working with in One Health and understanding the One Health team is to understand the roles and responsibilities of different partners. So I'm at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. And our mission is to work 24/7 to protect America from health, safety, and security threats, both foreign and in the US. And we actually have CDC staff working around the world in line with this mission. And we also work to fight disease and support communities and citizens to do the same. And we conduct critical science and provide health information to help protect our nation against dangerous health threats. And we respond whenever the need arises. So CDC's actually had a One Health office. We were the first US federal agency to establish such an office. We were created in 2009, though that was not the start of our One Health work at CDC. Our office provides a point of collaboration for partners in the US and around the world on One Health issues. And our big focus areas are on zoonotic and emerging infectious diseases, pandemic preparedness, One Health issues and emergencies at the human-animal environment interface like COVID-19, global health security and capacity building, strengthening One Health coordination and collaboration in the United States. And we also fill a unique role in preventing zoonoses shared between people and pets. And I'll touch on all of these a little bit more. So in terms of our global One Health activities, we've provided technical assistance to over 30 countries around the world. We partner with key international organizations. An example I want to share is we host CDC loaned experts, one who sits at FAO in Rome and one who works closely with OIE. And having these liaisons in place with key international organizations is really important for helping to strengthen our One Health collaborations and information sharing across sectors. And we use that model in the US as well with some of our federal interagency partners. We also serve as the head of an OIE collaborating center for emerging and re-emerging zoonotic diseases. And you're guessing correctly, that's kept us quite busy during the COVID-19 pandemic. We support activities that advance global health security and capacity building. And we lead CDC's One Health zoonotic disease prioritization process, which I'll talk a little bit more now. This is a scientific tool we developed at CDC to create a collaborative process for prioritizing zoonotic diseases of greatest concern. When you can bring all the right people into the room together from the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Environment, Wildlife, Agriculture, et cetera, whatever is appropriate for that country or regional level, you can have a bigger impact on developing those shared priorities and action plans to address those if all the right voices are in the room collaborating from the start. So we've developed this tool that has brought partners together to develop a list of priority zoonotic diseases of greatest concern agreed upon by all the relevant One Health sectors, making recommendations for next steps and action plans for One Health engagement to address those priority zoonotic diseases. It provides an understanding of the roles and responsibilities of all the represented One Health sectors long before there's an emergency, so people know who to call and who to work with when emergency does arise. And it helps to create or strengthen One Health coordination mechanisms and networks. And here's just some examples of reports from different countries around the world. And there's no two countries that are alike. They're all different with different players and partners in the room. And it's been a really successful way to launch these One Health collaborations. And here's just a map to show where this is done. Completed is shown in teal, pending and ongoing planning in purple, and then the red outline in West Africa highlights the first regional workshop that was done in the economic community of West African states, where we had 15 countries together who came to talk about their priority zoonoses and One Health needs for cross-border work. So that was really exciting. So I want to highlight some themes we've seen across these workshops around the world. There's some commonly prioritized zoonotic diseases, both endemic and emerging. It doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. Rabies and zoonotic influenza viruses are by far the most common. Viral hemorrhagic fevers are very common, especially across Africa. And then anthrax and brucellosis are other common priority zoonotic diseases that we have seen on countries' lists. We did this workshop in the United States back in December of 2017, and I want to highlight it here briefly. We had 3 federal partners, so CDC, our Department of Interior, which addresses wildlife and environment issues, and our US Department of Agriculture came together, and we held this workshop in the United States. And I just want to point out the power of collaboration. In December of 2017, these One Health conversations led to us having emerging coronaviruses as number 5 on our list, long before we had a glimmer of a hint of the challenges the world would face with SARS-CoV-2. And you can see the list of our other priority zoonotic diseases here for the United States. So I just want to showcase this as an example of the power of One Health discussions. We also see some common themes for One Health collaboration around the world. The big one is creating or strengthening a formalized One Health coordination mechanism. Another is improving data and information sharing across sectors, addressing laboratory capacity for the priority zoonotic diseases, making response plans, improving coordination for a joint outbreak response, strengthening One Health workforce and training, and addressing research gaps relevant to those priority zoonotic diseases. And actually, very exciting for us in the United States right now, Congress has directed CDC to work with our federal interagency partners to formalize a One Health coordination mechanism for our country and to develop a national One Health framework. So more to come on that in the future, but we're very excited to be working with our federal partners in achieving some of our goals from our own United States One Health Zoonotic Disease Prioritization Workshop. Another great example of the power of collaboration is this guide released by the Tripartite on taking a One Health approach to address zoonotic diseases in countries. This guide is available online in the 6 UN languages, and I encourage you to check it out. But I want to point out that there are 8 different focus areas of this guide, and the Tripartite and some of their partners, including CDC, are working together to create operational tools. There's one available on doing a joint risk assessment and bringing together partners from across sectors to jointly assess risk. There's one on creating and strengthening a One Health coordination mechanism or platform. And there's one on surveillance and information sharing that are in the piloting stages right now. So I encourage you to download this guide, check it out, share it with your partners, and see some of the ways to advance One Health collaboration to address zoonotic diseases. And of course, this is relevant for other One Health issues as well. Next, I want to highlight a project from the outcomes of our One Health Zoonotic Disease Prioritization workshops and recognizing the questions we've received and requests for help in building zoonotic disease surveillance systems. We worked to create this generalized approach to zoonotic disease surveillance, linking in the community, the subnational level, the national and international level. And we looked at those commonly prioritized zoonotic diseases and mapped out surveillance pathways for those and linked in human health, animal health, and environment sectors. So there might be vector-borne disease issues for some diseases, livestock issues, wildlife issues, human issues, always part of the picture, and having all of that linked up to kind of create this pathway to help guide how surveillance is done for zoonotic diseases in line with One Health needs. And we've got a new preprint out. You can check out more details and see some of the graphics for the different priority zoonotic diseases I highlighted earlier. I also want to showcase an example of a One Health outbreak investigation that occurred in the United States several years ago. So this is a bearded dragon, a highly popular reptile pet, especially across the United States. They're adorable, they're very personable and friendly. They're like little dogs in a reptile body, and they rapidly became popular pets across the country, including in households with children. And we saw a rare type of Salmonella, Salmonella Cotham and Salmonella Kisawara popping up, especially in pediatric cases. In fact, with a couple of hundred of illnesses associated with this outbreak, the median age was 3 years old. So a lot of young kids getting sick, including those who didn't even directly contact the reptiles. And our investigation found that there were challenges with environmental contamination in homes, things such as cleaning the reptile bowls in the kitchen sink and then coming in and preparing baby bottles and cross-contaminating, for example. And that led us to trace back to these large-scale bearded dragon breeders in a few different countries, some in the United States and some abroad. And there wasn't real regulation over the sale of these pets, but we were able to work with the pet industry who volunteered to work with these big breeders and get some protocols in place to minimize these types of human salmonella that might be found in these reptiles, and did this in a way without using antibiotics, which was really exciting and helped to get that outbreak under control. So a good example of the power of One Health, the power of working outside of boundaries, working with industry partners, and just wanted to example here. Now I want to showcase a few of our COVID collaborations in the United States. So back in February 2020, when the news of SARS-CoV-2 was first ramping up, my phone was ringing off the hook from our interagency partners What do we know? Do we need to worry about animals? What about environmental concerns? And so we decided to get a group of people together and create a platform to share information and exchange science and research and find areas for collaboration across our human, animal, and environmental health partners in the United States. So we called it the One Health Federal Interagency COVID-19 Coordination Group, or OFIC. And we started off with about 12 agencies and quickly grew. We've got now 23 participating, and we're still meeting regularly today, addressing the One Health technical aspects of the pandemic. We've created 5 subgroups looking at that human animal environment coordination and have different agencies leading those subgroups with a focus on the connection of people, animals, environments with companion animals, including working animals and military dogs, animal diagnostics and testing, wildlife and zoo animals, production animals like farmed meat, and environmental health challenges like wastewater surveillance. And this has been really great to break down to the technical level and have a lot of coordination and collaboration and joint projects, joint investigations being done to make a real difference in our COVID-19 response. And this graphic shows our highly coordinated One Health approach to SARS-CoV-2 surveillance in the United States. By following this process and working with the state partners and local partners and different federal agencies, it's really allowed us to simultaneously determine the public health risks of zoonotic transmission, as well as the animal health outcomes, and has allowed us to respond to new emerging situations in real time, adapt our guidance as we learn more, all with that goal of protecting human health, public health, animal health, and animal welfare. And it's been really well received across our country with partners, and we've learned a lot for advancing One Health surveillance systems for other zoonotic diseases. Also, it took a lot more work, I will admit that, but the outcomes were worth it. We had multiple different agencies working together on a single guidance document. So one example here is guidance on managing farm mink and other farm mustelids during the pandemic. What did mink farmers need to do to keep the virus off their farm, protect worker health, protect the mink, protect companion animals on the farm, protect wildlife around the farm? And we had all the right agencies working together and putting guidance into one single place to make it as easy as possible on our industry partners to follow and use to help protect human and animal health. So just an example there to showcase. And we've got all of our different guidance documents for the pandemic and One Health on our COVID-19 Pets and Other Animals website. So you can check that out in more detail if you're interested. In addition to coordinating within the federal government, I mentioned the importance of working with state and local partners. So the OFIC works with our state federal COVID-19 coordination group. We have a regular call that brings together our state, tribal, local, and territorial public health, animal health, and wildlife partners. And it's been a great platform for hearing needs on the front lines, the types of guidance they hope to have, and how we can work together to fill some of those gaps in real time. And then we also created a regular partners COVID-19 update webinar where we can bring together non-governmental organizations, academic partners, industry partners, and others to hear timely updates and give them a platform to ask questions and raise issues. So lots of coordination, but it's been really important for helping us achieve our goals in best protecting health. Here's just some examples of some recent publications that have come out from OFIC partners and state and local partners on addressing SARS-CoV-2 and household pets and animal shelters, issues with variants and issues with identifying an unexpected hotspot of coronaviruses in North America. So you can check these out to learn a little bit more about our work and see some of these successful examples of One Health collaboration. So I mentioned we fill a unique void in addressing zoonoses shared between people and pets. CDC has a Healthy Pets, Healthy People program that focuses on preventing zoonoses and advancing One Health needs around the connection between people and pets, but also there's a lot of great resources for livestock and wildlife. We've got a page with information for healthcare providers, whether you're a physician or a nurse or a veterinarian. And we have a lot of great resources on how to keep people and animals safe and healthy. So I encourage you to check this out. And we've got a great newsletter we send out once a month with new information and updates. And it's also got an A to Z list of all the zoonotic diseases that are of interest, where you can find information about the human health and animal health and environment aspects of those diseases. I want to take a moment to highlight workforce and the importance of One Health cross-training. Having that collaboration across sectors and across disciplines is necessary for a national workforce to be effective. And this comes from the International Labor Organization guidelines. But unfortunately, most national workforce strategies and education and training programs really focus on a single discipline or sector. So universities have a key role in helping us to address the technical skills and the implementation of a One Health approach. And there's a lot of great work going on in there at universities around the world, including the National University of Ireland in Galway. So keep that in mind. And I also am a big fan of working with students. I actually got my CDC career launched by participating in CDC's disease detective program. It's called our Epidemic Intelligence Service, or EIS program. And we bring in a cohort of doctors, scientists, nurses, physicians, veterinarians, and other health professionals from the US and also international colleagues to train together for a 2-year on the job. Like, I got a paycheck doing this. It was fabulous to help, serve our country while gaining practical skills in epidemiology and public health. And I want to just showcase some great One Health in action examples from our disease detectives around the world. Up here in the top left are some of our disease ecologists and veterinarians going into Python Cave in Uganda, where the scariest thing were not the pythons on the bottom of the cave, but some of the viral hemorrhagic fevers they were going in to investigate. Here in the middle is one of my veterinary colleagues promoting a Rift Valley fever virus vaccine for sheep to protect livestock health and human health. Up here on the right is my colleague who helped discover a new orthopox virus in the Republic of Georgia. Down here on the bottom left is a colleague working on Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome coronavirus in the Middle East, and that link between people and camels. Here I am back in my EIS days swabbing for salmonella on a poultry farm, investigating an outbreak there. And then the example on the bottom left is how animals served as a sentinel for a lead poisoning outbreak in a village in Africa, helping to identify a problem and protect the health of children. So lots of great One Health in action disease detective stories there. So to wrap up, I want to highlight some lessons learned in One Health. Collaboration is key. Building that network of trusted partners and stakeholders long before an emergency is critical to be successful whenever there is an emergency, whether it's on the magnitude of an outbreak or a pandemic. It's important to clearly delineate roles and responsibilities of all partners that are involved. Having a platform to formally coordinate and communicate across sectors really helps strengthen those collaborations. And using that platform to identify shared priorities across sectors can really be helpful in maximizing limited resources, as well as improving and achieving those health outcomes for people, animals, plants in our shared environment. Having a system for surveillance and information sharing across sectors is really important for early warning and early action. Having plans for outbreak response and case investigations, again, in place before there's an emergency, so everyone knows who to talk to and what the roles and responsibilities are, makes things go a lot more smoothly. Applying a One Health approach towards prevention and control is critical. Trying to stay one step ahead of not just stopping an outbreak, but what can we do from preventing an outbreak or a pandemic. And then always having a plan to coordinate and sync up communication across sectors is really important. Using that common language, maximizing your messages really goes a long way towards improving health as well. So for the future, We need to have enhanced One Health collaboration across sectors. This is critical. We can seize the moment right now with this global spotlight put on One Health, so we can ensure that all stakeholders have a shared vision and roadmap for implementing One Health strategies for disease surveillance, investigation and response, pandemic preparedness and prevention, and prevention and control activities and workforce needs. And again, One Health, the power of collaboration to effectively address shared health threats. Working together truly allows us to have the biggest impact on improving health outcomes for people, animals, plants, and our shared environment. And I challenge you all to look for colleagues outside of your normal networks to have a conversation with, hear about their perspectives, look for opportunities to collaborate, all in line with One Health. And I just want to sincerely thank my colleagues and partners and mentors from around the world who contributed to the collaborative work that I presented here today. And again, to thank you all for inviting me to be one of the keynote speakers. And here's some ways you can keep connected with our One Health office and our One Health work through these different newsletters. So thank you very much again, and I'll look forward to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Casey, for a really fantastic presentation. It's really great to see all of the work that's ongoing in the CDC and the amount of collaboration and interactions you've made with other sectors. So we're now into the Q&A part of the opening session. And again, if you have any questions that you haven't already put into the chat or into the Q&A box, please do so now. So we've had a couple of questions to come in, but I might just start off with a very general question for both Casey and Malcolm. Casey, as you finished off there, it's key to bring together the different sectors. And Malcolm, as you outlined in your presentation, it's recognized, as you gave with just the SMISES as a nice example, is a problem not just of humans as originally thought, but of humans, and obviously is related to the interaction with the environment. So what's the most challenging thing, do you think, in bringing together these sectors in your experience?
Well, I'll start off. The most challenging thing in bringing together these sectors is making sure everybody's on the same page with what's the ultimate goal here, finding that highest common denominator of wanting to protect public health, prevent trade issues, whatever it might be, so partners can understand that we're really all on the same page. And then also the challenge I mentioned around ensuring we have a common language. So in the United States, as an example, in our public health sector, we use the word response to mean an outbreak investigation, responding to that outbreak and stopping the outbreak. But in our animal health sector, they use the word response to mean a much bigger deal, like responding to a foreign animal disease. So we have to be careful about simple words like that could unintentionally cause confusion when you're having conversations with partners.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would agree. And I think it's probably around breaking down silos, you know, to get rid of entrenched ideas, and that comes through communication between different groups, different stakeholders. So making that step to get communication happening is particularly important. So some of the work that I've been involved in Brazil, I've been a partner in that work, and it's been led by my Brazilian collaborator. He's been very, very strong on education as part of the whole package of dealing with schistosomiasis problems. So to work with that, to work with different community groups in control as well. So yeah, it's about, I think that whole communication and coming together and facilitating that probably is a major first step that needs to be taken.
Fantastic, thanks Malcolm and Casey. So I might just pass some questions to you that have come in from the audience. So Casey, I suppose building on the issue of communication, as Malcolm mentioned there, do you feel, that we're communicating, I suppose, appropriately with, is the science communication around One Health good? I suppose there was one particular question in relation to the salmonella case you mentioned with bearded dragon and open access. I don't know if you wanted to address that.
Yeah, so it's very important to share messages in a way that can reach all the right stakeholders. I always tell my fellows that you're not fully doing your job if you don't tell people what they need to know in a way that they can understand. So with the salmonella and bearded dragon outbreak example, we had a website that we were updating in real time with new information, every few days, every week over the course of the months-long outbreak investigation. And later came that scientific publication. We do always aim for open access, but sometimes the budgets don't allow for that happening. But that is something important to share information widely with all the right partners. And I apologize for my internet instability.
Fine. Thank you, Casey. Malcolm, we've one for you. We didn't see Schistosoma bovis in your distribution map. Any reason for that?
I don't have a good reason for that. I'm sorry. I think my reason is very appalling in that I quickly copied an old map I had from one of my older PowerPoint presentations. So that's my poor excuse. But in reality, I think the way forward is we need to acknowledge animal infections and incorporate not just Schistosoma bovis, but a number of other animal species as well in Africa in distribution maps of schistosomiasis, and perhaps even to broaden that whole context and to start to consider the different hybrid forms that are currently being discovered, because there appear to be quite a few of them, and perhaps we need to be a bit more widespread and I guess inclusive in the information we give out about schistosomiasis. So it's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer for why I didn't include it in the talk.
Thanks, Malcolm. Another one for you, Casey. India is a hotspot for antimicrobial use and resistance threatening the global health, but the situation is not clear from One Health perspective in India. Is there any scope for collaboration with the CDC for generating knowledge and research capabilities in antimicrobial resistance One Health issues in India?
Yeah, so some of my CDC colleagues who work on antimicrobial resistance have some activities happening in India with infection prevention and control. And if you want to send me an email at onehealth@cdc.gov, I'd be happy to get you connected with them to learn more and talk about other needs in India from the One Health perspective.
Great, thanks, Casey. And back to you again, Malcolm. Restricting fishing in certain areas or certain times of the year will prevent to get the disease for a while, but it will have a long-term impact on people who would be infected once they come back to the same routine of eating or fishing. So
from what I understand, there was evidence that reducing or restricting the fishing to at least 100 meters off the shore did seem to have an impact on schistosomiasis prevalence in children in certain areas around that lake. It was stopped, I think, largely because people needed to eat, and the strategies that were used, I think, introduced in part to also protect the fisheries in the area. When that stopped, the implication is that schistosomiasis became a problem. Look, it's not a solution in and of itself, but I think it should be considered as part of the package. And it's something that requires a lot of thought and careful approaches to controlling the disease in those sorts of areas. I mean, there are other strategies that people have tried in various situations around Africa, the introduction of certain species of snail eating invertebrates, crustaceans, including crayfish, I think the red claw crayfish. That's been one strategy which has been very successful in reducing snail populations in endemic areas. Of course, introducing those biological agents can cause problems as well, because people may not like to see them there and may be suspicious about these introduced species. So I guess the point is we need to think of ways of controlling parasites such as schistosomes at all levels, and things such as restrictions are very helpful, but only helpful insofar as they don't cause other problems for people. So I guess it's about finding a balance and working together to think up good strategies for control. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks, Malcolm. I suppose related to that then for both of you, as Casey, you mentioned in your presentation, 60% of infectious diseases currently originate in animals, and we know that 75% of emerging infections originate in animals. Malcolm, in your presentation, you outlined the approach that was taken to try to mitigate the problem from One Health approach for schistosomiasis. But I suppose in planning ahead, and again, both of you have outlined the preparedness, and we've learned a lot from the experience with COVID. But do you think, what I suppose of the different actions we can take is most important? Is it surveillance? Is it behavioural change? Or is it again just making sure that all of the different sectors within the system that are talking together and talking and addressing the issue with the same approach and using the same language?
I think it's a bit of all of the above, addressing each of those key pieces, but in bringing together partners to work together, especially if it's new and starting off, finding that common goal, developing those shared priorities, making sure everyone's on the same page with what the roles and responsibilities are, whether you're going to target surveillance first or something else. And something I do in almost every single meeting that I'm in, I check to, especially in the virtual world, it's very easy. You check to see who's on and who might be missing and follow up with people to ensure you have all the right players in the conversation.
I agree. It's sort of horses for courses. Seeing we just had our major horse race at Australia yesterday. I can speak about horses, the Melbourne Cup. I was really taken with Casey's slide about healthy pets and healthy humans. And some of the really interesting pieces of research that came out about COVID-19 infections in North America particularly were related to the importance of pets in human well-being as the pandemic struck. And there's a reason why I'm telling this story, I suppose. And I think people's fear of what will happen to my pet if I discover that I've got COVID and I have to be hospitalized prevented people from going to hospitals. You know, who's going to look after my pets because, you know, I might live by itself. So in that sort of situation, I suppose the major activity that would have to be taken would be really, I suppose, sort of social work activities, you know, engaging people to deal with with folk who are suffering from these diseases, to help them to process how they can access medical care while benefiting the well-being of their pets. So I guess it's for different diseases, different concepts, you have to develop very different strategies, and so different things become priorities.
Yeah, that's a really important point, Malcolm. At the start of the pandemic, we were flooded with phone calls from concerned pet owners. Do I need to worry about my dog or cat? We saw that with Zika. We saw that with Ebola. People in the United States really care about their pets. And we knew there could be animal welfare concerns. We were seeing those pop up around the world as well. And people were afraid to go get care, worrying about what was going to happen with their pet. So I always say the power of the pet, it's really important to factor them into our preparedness plans. There's some real gaps all around the world in addressing companion animals. And that doesn't just include our beloved dogs and cats in our homes. They're, small mammals, things like guinea pigs and ferrets and others. But there's also working dogs that support the police and the military, or working for airport security, for example, and also our service animals who are helping to provide services to disabled people, and really addressing that companion animal piece in the bigger picture is important for all those reasons. So thank you for that.
Thanks, both of you. Malcolm, another question for you. How significant is schistosomiasis in India?
Yeah, really good question. In animals, it's especially significant, and there are a number of species that are particularly important. And I think, unless I'm mistaken, Schistosoma nasali is present in India and spreads right across Asia, right across to Indonesia. So it's a species that infects the blood vessels around the nostrils of cattle and causes problems. So it's largely a problem of animals and production animals, but the humans that work with those animals can become severely infested and suffer sacarial dermatitis, suggesting that the parasites don't ever develop to adulthood in humans. But I don't think we really know, and I think that's an area that needs a lot of intensive research. So the answer is it is very significant in animals. Fortunately, a lot of the animals will carry burdens of worms without serious disease, but some will be severely affected, and that will lead to production losses. And there is a very strong chance of zoonotic transfer of these animal parasites into humans.
Thank you, Malcolm. And another question for you, Casey. What could be done to help with coordinating a One Health action against COVID-19 in South Africa?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, one of the things we did in the United States, we were hearing multiple phone calls. So we decided to just set a meeting, and we started small, and we built and built and built, and adding partners to come to that conversation. So it takes a champion to kind of light that match and start the fire of discussions around One Health, and taking a chance in trying to set up a meeting. Even if just a few people come, you can build and grow over time and get the right people involved in discussions around what are our shared priorities here and how can we effectively coordinate.
Great, thanks, Casey. And just another one for you. Does the CDC have short online courses, something that might include case studies for junior researchers to hear?
We've got a few different things. There's some self-study courses like on the principles of epidemiology. We also have a Science Ambassadors program. That's a competitive program where they bring together middle school and high school teachers to work with CDC experts to develop a course curricula on a hot public health topic. There are a few One Health examples in here, and those are available online for people to use. So I'll put a couple links in the chat box shortly when I can pull them up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Casey, and thanks for the previous links you provided also. Malcolm, back to you. What are the known effects of schistosomiasis in Africa, especially West Africa, and any collaborative efforts to reduce its effect?
So what was the first part of that question? I'm sorry.
So what are the known effects of schistosomiasis in Africa, especially West Africa?
So both of the major species of schistosomiasis are present in West Africa. So there is Schistosoma mansoni and Schistosoma hematobium in many countries of those areas. So the effects are related to the specific diseases caused by both species. And also in West Africa, we have areas where there is hybridization occurring between Schistosoma hematobium and animal schistosomes, particularly in those countries. So the two diseases manifest in various ways or different ways. So Schistosoma mansoni particularly results in enlargement of the spleen, fibrosis in the liver, as eggs cause massive immune responses, and lead to fibrosis, alteration of blood flow, and collection of fluids within the peritoneum and so forth. So that is a phenomenon of Schistosoma mansoni. Schistosoma hematobium affects, as I said in my talk, the urinary system and also the reproductive system, particularly in young women. Genital schistosomiasis is quite debilitating because it leads to a lot of problems with sexual reproduction. And there are a number of people who are doing a lot of work on female sexual health in Africa as a result of hematobium infections. In fact, I think until very recently, it's been a neglected part of schistosomiasis research. So these are a number of the problems. What's been done to control? Various programs have control activities. These are led by countries, but also supported by consortia involving the World Health Organization and many partner countries and collaborators, particularly in Europe. So the United Kingdom, some of the northern Scandinavian countries have been very active in different control strategies in countries of West Africa. So control is largely built around mass drug administration, and the style of administration is dependent upon a number of factors, but particularly the level of infections in certain regions. When it's very high, then pretty much everyone in the population is treated. In other situations, maybe it's only school-aged children that are treated in the hopes of reducing some of the severe effects. So at the moment, a lot of the control strategies are really sort of focused on that drug treatment, and it might be once a year or maybe twice a year, or different rates of infestations, of treatments. But that, I guess, is the vanguard of our treatment. And I really think the future is a more integrated approach.
Fantastic, thanks, Malcolm. A question for both of you. What are the implications of One Health collaboration for global health equity and social determinants of health?
Yeah, One Health is highly relevant for both of those topics. And the exciting thing is with a spotlight on One Health, there are a lot of discussions around One Health and the Sustainable Development Goals, One Health and things like gender equity, and all sorts of topics that are expanding in this space right now.
Yeah, I agree, and in my presentation, I spoke about the various different sorts of ways of thinking about disease and control of disease. You know, global health, One Health, and planetary health, and I think we need to integrate our thinking as much as we possibly can to bring together as many components as we can in terms of understanding disease and then in working towards control of disease. So One Health is particularly valuable in addressing many of the disease problems, and particularly zoonotic disease problems.
Thank you. Malcolm, another one for you. How important would you rate development of novel rapid diagnostic tools for tackling schistosomiasis and neglected tropical diseases?
Absolutely critical for ongoing control of schistosomiasis. But what we need more than anything else is a diagnostic that is sensitive and highly specific. So we did have a range of good techniques. So diagnosis, I didn't have time to talk about it very much, has been largely built on microscopy methodologies, which have tended to be quite insensitive. In recent years, particularly for schistosoma mannsoni infections, the direct antigen testing using lateral flow technologies, so a dipstick style methodology has been used, and they have been thought to be tremendous, but there are a couple of questions raised about their sensitivity, and these questions have been coming in just recent years. There's kind of batch variation and all sorts of problems arising. We have some pretty good direct antigen tests. People are also working on molecular technologies and LAMP style diagnostics, and these are all promising, and the LAMP diagnostics particularly are looking quite promising. So I think there's a lot of interest in developing such rapid technologies. I think those lateral flow techniques particularly are well worth persevering with to see whether we can improve them and to develop better technologies around them. But as we continue to treat schistosomiasis in different parts of the world, with the drugs we have, we will move infections to lower burdens within humans. And in such situations, we then need to step up the sensitivity of those tests so that we know that we're getting good identification of the parasites. And the reason is because you don't need many parasite eggs to be excreted from humans to infect snails. And within the snails, there's rampant asexual reproduction, so that one snail can generate many thousands of parasites to go back and infect humans.
Thanks, Malcolm. So we're almost out of time. Just two final questions. One, although One Health is multidisciplinary, many people do not know about it. Are there any plans to incorporate One Health into the curricula, especially for low and middle income countries?
Sure. So I'll start off. There are some partners doing work in low and middle income countries in terms of One Health workforce and getting One Health incorporated into university curricula around the world. And there's some really strong networks that have formed in Southeast Asia, as an example, in East Africa, and there's a Central Africa as well. and others under development.
Yeah, there's quite a few partnerships developing between the USA particularly and developing nations, and also many European countries are also partnering with South American countries that I'm aware of. I'm sure there's other links as well, but yeah, it is happening. And certainly the curricula of veterinary schools, particularly in North America, will incorporate One Health training. There's perhaps not so much One Health training happening in medical schools. Perhaps, Casey, you might be able to address that a bit more effectively. I know for certain it doesn't exist in Australia, but that might be happening. So maybe we need to ramp up our education of people in medical schools a bit more than we are doing.
Yeah, there are definitely gaps in certain training, including in medical schools. There are a number of them, especially if they're housed in a university where there's a veterinary school and a college of public health, for example, where there are some One Health networks and activities formed. There's a great example from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, Canada, where they have this big One Health event and they bring together students right before their first and second year start. So they have students from the medical school, the veterinary school, the nursing school, physical therapy, social services, the lawyers, et cetera, and they all come together and spend 2 days talking to, hearing keynotes and working in small groups with experts and kind of understanding why One Health is so important. And that helps them think about One Health during the course of their study. And it's a really exciting and fun event. And I would encourage more places to consider something like that.
Fantastic. That sounds great. I mean, I know in our medical school, we introduce the concepts of One Health to our medical students through our health and disease courses, but yeah, there's lots more we could do to strengthen the knowledge and the understanding of One Health. So very final question for you both. As we know, we're going to hear later today and tomorrow about the ongoing One Health research here at NUI Galway and from some other keynote experts across this afternoon and tomorrow. But in your experience, are the findings of such research effectively and efficiently brought to policymakers and other key stakeholders? Or in your experience, what could we do to improve getting those findings and getting those research outputs to the people that need to hear them more rapidly?
Yeah, so that is a very important piece, putting together the findings of research with public health needs, animal health needs, environmental health needs in a way that can drive change with that goal of protecting health for all. So there are different groups and organizations that are great about sharing press releases. Social media goes a really long way these days. Events like One Health Day. There have been, outreach to politicians from different groups around the world relevant to One Health on One Health Day to kind of make a focus. So that is a very important piece.
Yeah, and I think probably the concept that we've been speaking about perhaps all afternoon or evening is that of collaborative approaches to dealing with particular disease situations. And so maybe thinking about the sorts of people that can be included within a response to a particular disease. I mean, could you perhaps include anthropologists or social workers or community nurses or something in a particular situation, and do so with respect for the people that you're speaking with, and deal with people, I guess, who are working on the ground to find the best ways of communicating. So I guess, you know, communication can be by mass media, or it can be a kind of interpersonal thing. And I think looking for the best strategies there probably involves thinking outside of the square and involving people who maybe are not scientists, but are really good at understanding how where people are thinking and how they're acting in their individual lives, and you know, maybe finding through them the best way of getting the message out.
Fantastic. Thank you both for such excellent presentations and for your discussions. We could keep talking all afternoon, but I'm conscious that, Malcolm, it's probably 1 a.m. where you are now, so we need to let you get to bed. And Casey, we need to let you get on with the rest of your day. So thank you so much for such excellent presentations and for taking time out of your really busy schedules to help us celebrate World One Health Day today. It's been great, and I hope that we can meet in person in Galway soon for coffees and pints or whatever. So that's the end of our opening session. Our next session will be a focus on infectious disease and zoonosis, and will be chaired by Professor John Dalton. So that will start at the same link that you all have now at 3:45 p.m. Irish time. And we hope you can all join us then. And I will speak to you again later in this evening for our very short closing session. So thank you again to Casey and Malcolm for such excellent presentations. I really enjoyed the afternoon and learned a huge amount. And thank you to all of the support team we've had helping to make sure this session ran smoothly. And we hope to see you all again at 3:45. Enjoy your break. Thank you.